Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
My name is Don C. I'm an alcoholic. Hello, everybody. My sobriety date is August 10th, 1978. And I am from the Mohican Nation, and my Indian name is Tantanka Wambly. And it's just really an honor for me to be here, this evening. But before we do get going, there's one thing I was taught to do, and especially after I got sober for a while, and I went back and I talked to our elders, and one of the things they said that I should do is to always smudge, and so just with your permission, it just takes a few seconds. I would like to do that. For those of you who may be familiar with that, it's just the burning of the sage leaves. And the sage is a medicine plant that has for purification. And so it's put in a bowl, and then it starts to burn smoke. And it's in that smoke the medicine comes out, the purification medicine. And then what I will do the smudging with is this eagle's fan. This is from an eagle's wing that was given. And these are, in our cultures, very sacred. And when you allow the medicine to come on the wing, and as the medicine gathers on the wing, then like an eagle's wing will fly through the air, then it shoots that medicine across the whole place. And what it allows is everything to interconnect. And that's the way, and I see some of you know what this is. So this is good. And so that's the way I was taught to do that. Then also I'm going to place it on a red cloth here, because also it's in our tradition it says that whenever you are in the presence of an eagle feather, you're not supposed to lie. And I am an alcoholic, so I think I will put that out there. I was sitting up here thinking I would have that eagle feather on one side and Frank on the other one here, I think they call it a sandwich or something, So maybe I'll tell you my best Indian joke that I know. And then, long time ago, there was this little Indian boy was in this boarding school up in the northern part. And he sent this boarding school, and there was this teacher there that she was always watching for these little Indian kids that seem to have it, They're superstars. And so she happened to notice this one little Indian kid, and he was pretty good, good in math and good in science, and he had like charisma. And she watched him. And finally she said, here's one of them. So she called him up in front of the room there, and she said, this little Indian boy, she said, she said, you're going to have the ability to go far. She said, you're smart. The Creator has given you a lot of blessings. And she says, as I watched you, she said, the only problem you have, she says, is you just lie a little bit. She said, not like big lies, but just little lies. And she said, that's not good. She said, so maybe I'll help you correct that. So when you grow up, she said, then you tell the truth and everything will go your way. So he said, okay, teacher, that would be good. You help me. So a couple days later, he's out in the hallway and he's talking to some other kids, and he's telling this little story, and she caught him, he was lying. So she called him aside, and she says, that's what I was talking about. She said that you wasn't telling the truth. Oh, teacher, thanks for reminding me, he said. So a couple of days later, out in the playground, and she catches him lying again. She pulls him aside, coaches him. And the weeks go on, he keeps lying, she keeps coaching. She tried psychology, 300 series, 400 series, 500 series, everything she knew. Little kid, he just wouldn't quit lying. And, so finally, she called him up in front of her class on Friday night, and she said, sit down. Oh, he stood down. She said, that's it. I tried everything I know. You're always lying. I can't get you to quit. She said, next time I catch you lying like that, I'm going to take you right to the principal's office. God, he stood up and says, man, don't do that. Don't make me go up to see the man, you know. No little kid likes to go up to see the principal. He just begged, don't. He's all right. So, weekend went by. Monday morning, he come in and, boy, he was excited. He come up to the teacher. Teacher. He said, you can't believe it. He said, me and my dad said we had a weekend by ourselves, father, son. He said, we hiked, we camped, and said, we cooked and had to talk, you know. Said Sunday, he said, we went down there by the lake, we was fishing. He said, fished all day, only caught 2 fish. He said, Dad caught one. He said, I caught one. He said, teacher, it was trout. He said, those trout was 100 pounds apiece. God, teacher, that were this long. She said, that's it. She grabbed him by the ear and down the hallway, right up to the principal's office. She took him in there and set him right in that chair. So, of course, she didn't kind of inform the principal what was going on there. So the principal leaned forward and he said to this little Indian boy, he said, heard you had a good weekend. God, I had a great weekend. He said, boy, me and my dad, we went camping and fishing, caught 2 fish, we had 100 pounds apiece. So the principal leaned back in the chair and he kind of put his fingers together like that. And he said, you know, sometimes, he said, you do have to fight fire with fire. He said, psychology stuff don't work. So he leaned forward, he looked at that little Indian boy and he said, you know, me and my wife went for the weekend camping with man to woman talk, he said. We watched some butterflies, some birds, he said. Really had a marvelous time. Saturday night, he said, we cooked this big supper around the campfire, and he said, cleaned up everything. We sat in front of our tent, and he said, all of a sudden, this bushes moved on one side. So this big grizzly bear come running into camp. He said, walked around that fire really slow. His headed right towards me and my wife. And we sat there. He says, finally, we seen a bush move on the other side. Bush moved a little bit. He said, this little Chihuahua dog come running into camp. You see that Chihuahua dog? It looked at that bear, and he said, run right over that bear, jump right on that bear's back. He said, run up by his neck. He said, bit that bear in the neck. He said, that grizzly bear dropped down dead. Boy, a little boy looked at that principal, and the principal looked back at that little Indian boy, and they sat there looking at one another. Finally, little boy just stood up, and a big smile on his face, and he said, sir, he said, I'll have you know I'm the proud owner of that dog, and that's the second bear killed this month. Well, they would say, when you do this, you tell your story, what happened and what that was like and what happened now, what's going on now. And about the best way that I could tell my story, I guess, is, and I think the person originally I heard this story from is here tonight. It was a long time ago I heard this story, but I remember when he said this story, I related to it right away. He just, you know, sometimes they tell you that and it just reaches and grabs your heart. And it was a story about this boxing match. And it was in this big arena. And it was full of people. They were sitting all around all those seats. And there was 2 down there in that boxing ring. And they always save the front row for your family. They get always the choice seats. They put a rope there so they can sit there. So my family was sitting there. In this one corner was this one in the black trunks. His name was Alcohol. And he was over there hanging on the rings. And I was in the other corner, the white trunks. And everything was going like it normally was supposed to go. And the referee called everybody together, explained the rules. I said, no problem, understand those rules. So the bell rang, we come out there, and we started to box around with each other. And everybody's kind of watching. It's fun. The bell would ring, we'd go sit down, and it was no big deal. The bell would ring, we'd come out there and start boxing around again. And after the 3rd or 4th round, it seemed like the Alcohol got a lucky punch and just snuck one in. It just really stung me really good. And I kind of stepped back because it surprised me. And the Alcohol said, oh, that was just a lucky punch. He said, it's nothing. He said, you can whip me. And I could feel that building up inside because I knew that I could, and I knew it was a lucky punch. So as we got out there a couple more rounds, and pretty soon you started to see it was getting boring. People started leaving because it wasn't a good thing to watch. And as the rounds continued, alcohol would start to sneak in more lucky punches. And each time it hit that lucky punch, I'd say, oh, is this a lucky punch? You can whip me. And I said, I know I can. I know I can. I can do that because I felt strong inside. So finally, it got to the point where alcohol was punching a lot more, and most of the people all left. But I looked, and there my family was sitting there. It was about the only ones left. And I was really focused on that alcohol, and the alcohol was smiling at me. And it was giving me that message. And it was, you can whip me. Man, I knew I could because I was strong. Finally, we got a couple more rounds out there, and the alcohol put me on my knees. I got down there on my knees, and it wasn't playing the rules anymore. I started kicking, stomping, doing all this stuff. They ring the bell. I get back to the corner. And it kept telling me, you can whip me. Finally, one of my sons come up, and they said, Dad, they said, let's go. We got to get out of here. You're not winning this thing. And I said, just one more round, man. Just one more round. You just watch. And I went back in there. And I give that alcohol my best shot. And this time it put me right on my stomach. And it wasn't playing the rules there either. Kicking, stomping. Finally, I looked over, and my daughter come up, and she said, Dad, she says, we're going to go. We're leaving now because we can't take this. You come with us. And I looked at her, and I said, no, just one more round. I know I can do it. And so they left, and I went out there one more round. And this time I was on my hands and knees. I was on my stomach crawling. All I could see was the alcohol tennis shoes. And all of a sudden I had that realization. I said, I know the alcohol is lying. I can't whip them. And so I crawled out of that arena, and I left. And it was very painful crawling out of there, and all those thoughts and all those things that you have, because you know that everything is gone. And I got out there, and I started to get well. Now, after maybe a month or so, I started thinking about the alcohol. And I said, you know something? I think I know another way. So I thought about that for a while, and I went back into that arena. And I walked in there, swung those doors open. I told alcohol, I said, I'm back. And he said, I know you will be. And I said, I come here to whip your ass. And he said, I know you can do it. And you come right up here. And I went up there. And I got up there, and this time it wasn't like rounds. The alcohol did the dirty punching right away. I immediately was down looking at his tennis shoes again. And it didn't take very long. I knew that I was no match. I knew he lied to me. And so, once again, I crawled out of there. I got on my hands and knees. I crawled out there, and it really hurt. And I got out there, and I started thinking. About a month. I said, you know something? I think I know another way. I think I know an old Indian trick I'll use on him. So I went back into that arena, swung those doors open. I said, alcohol. I said, I'm back. And the alcohol said, I knew you would be. I've been waiting for you. And so I went in there, and didn't even let me get in the ring this time because it didn't play fair. And it was August 9th, 1978. I crawled out of there, and I didn't crawl back in. I didn't have to go back in there no more. But it took what it took. And when I left that arena, it was when I come into AA. Seriously. I was in AA before. In and out, slipping, doing those things. But when I came back that last time, I'm telling you, I was ready. I didn't have any resistance. Because the alcohol is the reason I came back in. I knew there was no other place to go. There was nothing to do. And it was an alcohol. It was an AA that I had to come to. And I come into AA, and I started to do things that I wouldn't do before. One of which was get a sponsor. And so I've been watching this guy for a long time. I didn't like him. But there was something about him I did like. And it took a lot of a day to go up and to ask this man if he would help me in this work. And so he said, well, sit down. So I sat down and at the table, and it was in York Street in Denver. And he sat and he looked at me, for a long time, and he kind of shook his head, and he said, no, I've been watching you for a long time. In and out, in and out. And he said, I've been in this program a lot of years. He says, I watch you Indian guys come in here. Hang out, leave, hang out, leave. He said, you guys just don't make it. Something's going on here, he said. You guys don't make it. And he kept talking like that, and I hated that how he was talking down to me like that. Like, you Indian guys, you ain't going to make it. And I remember he just, how you got a little puppy, and then you rub that puppy's face and it gets mad, and you rub it, it gets mad. That's how I felt, like that little puppy. It's just like he was just rubbing like that and rubbing like that. And I remember I sat there, he kept rubbing my face and telling me like that. And I remember I sat there and I was thinking to myself, I kind of leaned forward and I looked at him, I thought, I'll show you, you white son of a bitch. I said, I'll get sober. Let's just give you, whatever. But I think that's where I was at that time. And I think in his own way, he kind of realized maybe the only thing I had to work with was some anger. I didn't have any kind of other feelings or stuff. I just had that. And so it went on, and we had continued our talk. And he showed me this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he opened it up and showed me how much 164 pages was. He said, this is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That if you are willing to do exactly what it says in these 164 pages, he said, this program isn't about coming in and slipping, coming in and slipping. What this program is about is never drinking again. That you will die sober. You will never have to drink again. And I'd never heard it said that way. I heard it say, whoever gets up the earliest is the most sober. I heard it said many ways, and that keep coming back and all that stuff. But he made no bones about it. What this program is about is staying sober, providing I was willing to do some things. Then he went on to say some other things. He said, there is some things I'm not. He said, I'm not your taxi cab. He said, I ain't your banker. I ain't your motel. I ain't your daddy. Whatever. But anyway, he told me these things that he wasn't. But he says, I'll tell you some things that I will be. He said, one of those things, he said, I will be your friend. And he talked to me about the friendship. He says, it has nothing to do with you, what your decisions are. He says, I will decide to be your friend. Will you drink again or not? He said, that's one thing you can count on. I will be your friend. He said, the next thing you can count on is, he said, I'll share some experiences with you. He says, because I know about how to stay sober. And he said, you little brown son bitch, you don't know. He said, there's something I know that you don't know. And that's hope, because I know something you don't. And he went on to say, he says, and we work together because we both want to work together. We don't have to work together. Anything that you don't like, you just quit working with me. Anything I don't like, I'll quit working with you. But he said, we will work together because we choose to do that. And so then he sent me off with this big book, and he showed me these pages where there's 12 proposals are. And he said, I want you to go look at each of these 12 proposals. And you look at each one of them, and you ask two questions. One question you ask is, do I want to do this step? I was to read step one and say, do I want to do this? Then I was to ask the second question, that step, am I willing to go any length to do that step? And I had to go through all 12 of those proposals, answering those two questions. But see, I think what he was really doing, he set me up for later on. As I saw later on, it was a setup. Because I come back whining, he'd say, I thought you said you wanted to do this. Or I come back and I tell her, you said you was willing to go to any length. Didn't you change your mind? No, I didn't change my mind. You said you want to do it? I want to do it. Then what the hell are you calling me for? Go do it. But you see, but I got into that, and I started to look into these proposals. I looked at that big book, and the first time I saw that big book, it was the most boring book I ever saw in my whole life. It was really a boring book, nor could I find any instructions in it. They were saying the instructions was in that book, but I could never find them. I didn't know what that meant. And so I got into that, and I started to understand about what it meant. There's instructions in there. And I was told I had to read this many, many times. This first 43 pages has to do with step 1. Then I was shown on page 52, there's a paragraph. It was called a manageability paragraph. And I was to look at that paragraph. There's some statements in there. We were having trouble with personal relationships, and I was to turn it into a question. And I was to look at my personal relationships and my unmanageability in regards to those, and in emotional nature. And so I started to take a look at that, and I guess I had never thought about looking at it that way. It says we had to have a different point of view. And I got through that step 1, and I started to see there's some major stuff happening in my life. It was wrong, because by the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was gone. I had 3 children. I had to go through a divorce. I was thousands of dollars in debt. I was really messed up. And to come into a program and start to hear about sobriety, and and it wasn't like I didn't have the removal of that. There were times I wanted to drink during this first years of sobriety, and it would just seem that I was hearing enough in meetings to keep it up. I remember this one time I left York Street, and I was, you know how you get that nervousness and you start all this stuff and you know what you're going to do. And I sat there in this meeting, and it was the stupidest meeting I ever heard, and no one was making any sense. I couldn't pray. I won't call Frank, because you'd hear, well, you said you wanted to do it, and all this other crap. So I didn't want to talk to him. Finally, and I was so damn miserable, I just said, if this is sobriety, I want nothing to do with this crap. I said, I'm going to just go drink. So I got my car, and I was headed towards the Purple Turtle. It was a bar on. Some of you guys probably know what that is. But anyway, I was headed there. And I remember I was going down 8th Street, and Denver General was there. And I had heard somewhere in a meeting, somebody said something weird like, when all else fails, go work with another drunk. And I don't even know if I know what that meant for sure, but I turned into the Denver General. And I went up there, had a detox center then, and I went in there, and I recognized one of the people who worked there was, I recognized her from the program. Well, I didn't know even what to tell her. I'm standing there just trying to figure out what to say, but she had been around long enough. She says, I bet you need to talk to a drunk. And I said, yeah. So she put me in this room with this, I think he was a Mexican guy. He couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Mexican. He was all bandaged up. So I'm talking to him, and he's, probably trying to tell me to get the hell out of there. I don't know exactly what he was saying. But the point of it is I sat in there, and I looked at him, and when I left, I didn't feel holy. I only felt different. But different enough, I got my car. I didn't go there, and I went back home. And so whenever I found out, whenever that would happen, if I could get to Denver General, and this is about the first 6 months, I walked in there, and she'd say, room 5. And I would go in there. And that really was true, because I didn't even know it said that in the big book, but it did. But when that thing sets in, I now understand what that is. And so that was really helpful, for me to do that. And then I was taught how to go to that chapter, We Agnostics, for step 2. And I went into that. And I found out how to look in those 9 areas. Looking at the possibility or that hope that step 2 gives. And I was to look in those same 9 areas: personal relationships, emotional nature, which today I call creating a vision. It's a picture of moving towards something. And I like the way that word step is worded, is that talks about you came to believe. And what I understand very early about this step, it didn't mean you had to believe it. You had to mean, like, would you be willing to believe that this power exists? Would you be kind of willing to possibly believe that maybe this power would exist? Would you be doubtingly willing to kind of believe that maybe that this power does exist? And I was taught any of those was enough. every little bit you can hang on to, and I didn't have that much to hang on to. And I come in and I took that step. And so then I was taught where to look for the instructions for step 3. And I remember going through that step 3. One thing that I really was grateful for, whoever it was that added those words, God, as you understand Him. Because the time I come in, I was raised from mission schools and a lot of different beliefs I had about God. But I remember this one particular time. I come from a family of 7. I remember my brother was killed. This is when we were all still drinking. And he was killed, and I waited for them to cover his grave, and I waited there. And when they left, I stood on his grave, and I looked up, and I told God to go fuck himself. I said, I'll never ask you for nothing. And I didn't. I never prayed. I never said anything. Because I felt that a God that did something like that wouldn't. And so I had some funny concepts. I had this blockage in some things about this. But thanks to you, and when I first came in the year that I was flipping, what I call that power, I heard you could call him a doorknob, and I could hear I wasn't right in that spot to call him a doorknob. But I was in a spot where I made a decision initially to call this power Charlie. And the reason I call it Charlie was this guy I met in college when I was there. I really liked him. He really was respectful to me, and so I just kind of picked that name. And so when it came time to do this third step, I went over to this sponsor's place, and we got there, and he talked to me about that third step. All those things that to understand about self-will run right, and running on self-propulsion, and being the actor, and we went through that almost line by line like it was an instruction. And that there was a question in that part of the big book. I was to answer that question. And I remember when we got done with that, then I didn't know about how you took a third step or nothing, but we got down on our knees, me and this man. And we had that big book, and I was taught then he would read that third step prayer, and then I would read that third step prayer. And I remember that's what we did. We got on our knees, and we read that third step prayer. And there was something happened there. I did not sure I knew what it was. But what I knew what it was a cat. There was a cat there. And cats and I always had an understanding. I don't like them, they don't like me. You stay away, I stay away from you. But that cat came to me. And I could feel there was something that went on there that night. Then I said, when we got done, I said, what next? He reached behind his chair and he pulled out a legal tablet, a ruler. And by the time I was done there, I was starting to write inventory. And I wrote the inventory. And I was taught to write that in the column inventory. And so I wrote my inventory, and I did a resentment inventory, fear inventory, and sex inventory. And I also was told that you had to tell all. You had to tell everything. And there was quite a few things that I had done. I just assumed that I not tell them. And I put them under the category of the dark crannies. So I wrote the dark crannies on a separate sheet of paper. I didn't put them exactly in with the inventory. And when it came I carried that in my pocket. And when it came time for that fifth step, I knew this day came that feelings start to sit in, and I knew this was going to happen. I was either going to fifth step or drink. And I didn't want to do that fifth step. So I called the sponsor. He wasn't there. I couldn't get hold of him. I called another guy. Couldn't get hold of him. Called another guy. And I didn't know how to ask him. I didn't know him really well. But finally, I was kind of stumbling with my words, and he said, do you need a fifth step? And I said, yeah. I said, I really need to. So I went over to his place, and I read that document. And I read the resentment inventory, fear inventory, and the sex inventory. And he was very, very helpful in helping me see some things that I didn't see. But when we got done, he says, well, have you told everything? Do you have it all? And I remember sitting there, and one part of me was saying, tell him yeah and get out. And the other thing, I had heard enough in the program that I knew you had to tell all. But I had things in there was legal issues, sexual issues, and there were some things there I didn't want anyone to know that I did those things. And while he's making the next pot of coffee, he was telling me some things about his story. He got into some pretty juicy stuff, about what he did. And I remember sitting there thinking, where I was at the time, I thought, he told me some juicy stuff, so I thought, okay, son of a bitch, I got it now, because if you tell on me, I'll tell on you. And that's just kind of what I was thinking about. But I didn't know that we was in whole different spaces. He had freedom, and I didn't. And he was doing it from freedom, and I was doing it from fear. And so I went through, and I read the rest of that to him. And when I got done, I was told to go home, and it says there's instructions in here on what you're to do when you get back home. And then you need to review those 5 proposals to see have you missed anything. And so I got home, and one of the instructions, it says that you thank God from the bottom of your heart that you know Him better. And I was taught that those instructions are in the big book. Every sentence almost is like instruction, something that you do. So I got home, and I got on my knees, and I was just talking. At first, I was just thinking about what the heck was going on in my life. I couldn't believe I was doing this stuff. I couldn't even believe, to me it really didn't seem like that stuff worked, like it was working. And I remember I had this little inside vow to myself. I said, you know something, this is what I'm going to do. I said, I'm not going to say this out loud, but I'll go ahead and I'm going to work these proposals to the 5th step. But if I personally don't see something different in that 5th step, when I get done with it, I ain't doing the rest of that shit. That's about halfway. So I thought, I'm going to try that, and if I don't see something, because I didn't want to go around people saying, oh, you got a light in your eyes, and I had no light in nothing. I was miserable, It wasn't like that for me. But I remember when I stood there in my apartment, and all of a sudden I started to have this feeling. There was something that was going on inside of me. And so I was sitting there and I was talking to Charlie about that. And all of a sudden I found myself praying, and I started to use the word God. And I wasn't using Charlie anymore. And I found that this was happening almost like automatically. Then I looked at those promises in the 5th step. And I started to sense that there was something, I could feel that nearness of the Creator. Just like it said, I could feel that. And some of that stuff that I had, that guilt and that shame and stuff, I could tell it was gone. There was something happened inside, a certain freedom. You see, that happened in that. Then out of that, I got my list of character defects. And then I was taught on how to become willing to have the Creator remove those defects of character. And I remember it was sort of like I had to sometimes I have to hear stories. I don't know, maybe that's the way I was raised or something, to understand something. But he told me that step 6 and 7 is so simple but so difficult to do. But I heard this guy tell a story one time. He said, supposing that you have this stove, and what you're going to do is bake this cake. So you get this pan, and you put all that flour and sugar, and you stir it up. You get the oven to 350. Now what you want to do is bake that cake. You got to open up the door. You got to take that cake, and you got to stick it in the oven. Then close the oven door, and allow that stove to bake that cake. And he said, he says, that's like your defects of character. He says, once you are willing to put them in the oven, or give them to the Creator, then you let the Creator, it's His job to bake that cake. He says, but you keep peeking in the oven, It's not there, it's God's will, I must be doing something wrong. He said, put it in there and leave it alone. Don't be peeking at it. And so, then I started to see, some of what they were saying. Don't peek in it. Don't be taking it over. Leave it in there. And so I had a lot of shifting started to take place. I could tell. Then I got into my amends, and I had a lot of amends to make. And the first pass through, and once in a while, even yet today, I didn't do my amends right. I didn't listen a lot to amends and how to make them. I read the instructions, but I was in a hurry. So I made my amends in 3 columns: light amends, medium amends, and hard amends. I put it in 3 columns. So I chose some light amends, and I went out there and did 3 of those, and it was really cool, and it went really fine. So I said, this is really cool. You just go there and you tell them this stuff, and it went really good, and they were hugging me and everything else and happy for me. So I went to the next column and I chose another amend. So I went out there and this amend that I made, what I did is I had just written some things to make sure I said it. And so I went to this person and I read this document and I made the amends, and they turned to me and they said, are you done? And I said, well, yeah. And they said, well, you didn't cover half the shit that you did. And I said, well, look I'm in this program and I'm writing these amends, and this is how I see the amends. And we got in a big fight. And so I had to go back and make amends, for making amends. And those are tough ones to go back and, the second time. But one of the things that I was taught, it was very adamant about making these amends in person and making them very thoroughly. And eventually I was taught to write them out. And I found out today I still need to write my amends out. Because if something goes wrong, I can change my mind or lighten it up a little bit or leave something out, This way I know if I write it, then I know my intent when I go there to do that. And so I got through those amends. One amend I kept in an envelope I just made that amend. I didn't know where this person was. And by one of these accidents, I was up in Michigan here just about 6 months ago, walking around a parking lot, and this person's hollering at me. And I didn't even know this person. We both got so darn old we didn't hardly recognize one another, but they recognized me. And that was the last amend I made from that very first amend that I had carried at. And that was really a very powerful amend. Then I got into steps 10 and 11, those maintenance steps. And it took a while to find out the power about those steps. And I was taught by this initial man that took me through the steps that what this stuff is about power. It's about power now, and you can't mess with it. That you mess with it, you get hurt. And I have messed with it, and I have gotten hurt by doing that. And so then I was taught also to go through those steps every year, to go back through them again, and go back through them again. And one of the primary reasons I was told that the ego always works right on where you have your shit together. Right? Where you think you're cute and you're sweet and you're hot and you're spiritual and you're... And I find that this is true. Right where you think you're so cool. That's where it breaks. And I find each time through that work, I don't believe... Like I have already gone through a set of steps, and I said, I'm going to write how it's going to come out, thinking... And it didn't come out that way. And it never does. And there's the magic there. So I started going through those steps. Now I remember when I was 4 years sober, I was going through this work, and would have been a period of about 30 days or so. I remember I went crazy. I just went like nuts. I couldn't pray. I hated meetings. I didn't want to read a big book. Everything was stupid. I was not getting along with people, starting to get in trouble at work. People getting on my nerves. I was judgmental, wanted to run, thinking about leaving. And so I went up to Denver, outside of Denver, and I talked to this Indian elder. Because by then I had learned this. When I was about 2 years sober, I had met this Indian elder who also was in the program. He was sober a long time. And I was struggling, and he said, you're going to have to go back home. He said, you're going to have to go back and make the culture a part of what your recovery is. And so I went back home, and I started doing some things around the spiritual way, the old way. I remember I went back home. I was really ashamed to go back there because I wasn't raised to do the things that I was doing, that I had done. But I got back there, and the elders was very happy to see me. And so I took them these 12 proposals one time. This was during the time I was working with Frank. Say that, but he had me do this inventory about being Indian, because he says that being Indian will get you drunk. And I didn't know what the hell he meant. But I found out what he meant when I went through that. And that was one of the strongest inventory, because I had all these beliefs about Indians and prejudice and white. And I had all these darn beliefs about that, and they weren't bothering me. But he saw that if I kept that up, that eventually I would be in trouble. So I went back and I took these proposals to the elders, and I said, "This is a program of recovery that I'm in," and I said, "I'm trying to blend this, get things together. What do I do?" So they said, "I want to ask you about these proposals." So they went and they asked me about everything. And I explained each one of them as I could. And what they said, that's not a separate way. That's the same way that we do it. That's just in our culture. They said the only thing that we would do different, they said, put them in a circle. Because we all think everything's in a circle. So they said, you put steps 1, 2, 3 in the east, like the sun. And that's the direction about finding God or the Creator or the higher power. Put steps 4, 5, 6 in the south. And that's that direction about finding yourself, the inventory steps. Put 7, 8, 9 in the west. That's the sunset direction, the forgiveness, the letting go. That's the direction about finding your relatives, establishing your relationships with others. And 10, 11, 12 in the north. And they said in that north, that's the direction of the elders. Then that wisdom, it can come for you. And so I started to work the steps that way. Then they started to show me that every step had a ceremony. And I didn't know how the old people did reflection. They always did reflective thinking. This wasn't new, but they just did it another way. And he said that before you go to through a set of steps, they said, go out there, take your drum, sing 4 songs. And then you wash yourself in the earth, the dirt of the earth. You know how animals clean themselves, like chickens and birds? They said, that's what you do first. Go out there, and you clean yourself up. To come to the Creator and say to the Creator, I want to make this journey through these 12 steps again. I'm preparing myself to be by you. And then I was taught in the third step, you take that third step with the chunupa, which is called the pipe. That you smoke that pipe and you load it. And you look at the unmanageability. And the elders, they said, if you want to look at your unmanageability and you want to look at yourself, they said, go to the water and separate the leaves and the pond and look in there. Look at yourself. You look in there to see what that reflection, and that's how they were taught to do it. They said, go look in the water, look at your own self. And so I learned to take that third step with the chunupa. And I learned the fifth step in the sweat lodge. And I learned to do step 6 and 7 with the staking ceremony. And that each one of those, it was the same thing. It wasn't different. And when I got that 4 years sober, I thought I was crazy. It happened so quickly. And I went to see this elder. And I was, when I go to see him, sometimes he whittles on a piece of wood because my mind's just screwed up. And he's going, and he just whittles. And I was telling him, I said, I got an A and everything's all messed up and and she left me in my job and I'm in trouble. My race car won't run. I'm running out of gas. I'm in trouble. I work on my fine performance appraisal warnings. I ain't got no money. And I went on and on and on. He's just whittling. So finally he said to me, he says, how long are you sober? Exactly. So I told him exactly. It's 4 years. He says, he says, you're right where you're supposed to be. And you hate to hear that shit when you're right up into, you don't hear God doesn't give you more than you can handle, I don't want to hear that. You want to hear you're right where you're supposed to be. And so he said, let me tell you about something. And he took a stick and he drew a circle in the earth, in the dirt. And he said, everything in the earth goes by cycles. The sun, moon, earth, it all spins around. It takes 1 year to go around the sun. It takes 1 day to spin in the circle. The moon, 28 days. Everything goes in a circle or cycle. Every animal, every plant, tree, bud, 1 season, matures, harvest, no leaves. Everything works that way. And he said, we human beings are so arrogant that we think we're the exception to everything, that we don't participate in all these laws that the Creator had. Every part of the earth runs under these laws. And he said, you too, and me. And he said that the human being, what we do when we grow, we grow in a 4-year cycle. He said that's the way it is. You grow in a 4-year cycle. And he said that when you first come into AA, a life force, like the sap in an oak tree, it comes inside of you. It's called grace. And that you remember, I like that when they say about grace, because I was told very early about grace in terms of how I could understand it. They said that to qualify for this grace, you have to qualify for it. There's certain conditions you got to meet. And the way that I understand how this grace works, it's like a list. You got to be a lying, cheating, no good, adultering, son of a drinking, and that there's a big list of these qualifications. If you have 3 or more, you qualify for the grace. Then it's just given to you. And then how that works when you qualify, the Creator has a cupboard that has these little grace clouds in it. And He sees you over there qualifying. And He reaches in and He grabs one of these clouds and He sails it through the air. And when it sails through the air, He times it so it stops over you. And that's that life force that you come in there. And you don't know what the hell is going on, and you lie and you cheat, you don't straighten up your act, but that life force helps you get through that point. It gets you in that place. And he said that that's what happens. Then he said your first year in the program, you're going to be like a tree that buds. At first you don't see nothing, just like an oak tree be standing out there. Don't know what the hell is going on, but that life force is getting you ready. And then pretty soon you start to see those little buds coming on your branches. You start to see yourself different. You start to get responsible a little bit. You start to find yourself doing some things, showing up on time. Then the second year of sobriety said, what you see is a maturing takes place. So how a bud would unfold, then pretty soon certain stability comes in the second year. Then just like an oak tree, those leaves unfold, it takes a certain shape. Then the oak tree thinks it's not going to get any better than this, and it comes into the season of the fall, the third year. And it comes to the fall, all of a sudden that oak tree goes from green to yellow, harvest fruits and nuts, and it's like you're in a groove. It's like you can do no wrong. That's it. Boy, it just works. Not that you don't get flat tires, you do, but right in front of the gas station. Right? And you got a lot of faith because God is just doing everything that you want. It's just it's so cool, that third year of sobriety. That's where I was. But then what happens is the oak tree standing out there, this comes into the 4th year, the 4th cycle. And the temperature changes a little bit, gust of wind comes along and blows a few of the leaves away. First that oak tree is saying, no deal, no big deal. Lose a few. Got a lot of them. A week or so later, temperature changes a little bit, about 1/4 of the leaves go away. The oak tree is still trying to be positive. So, well, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh, I can still handle it. I got a lot of leaves left. A couple of days later, temperature changes, a gust of wind comes by, and about 7/8 of the leaves go away. The oak tree standing out there, and it's thinking, well, I'll do my 11th step better, and I'll do my 10th step, and I'm not being prompt, and maybe a little mini 10-step inventory would be in order here. But it's going to work. But inside, that oak tree is thinking, shit. Because you know that shit's going away. And it's almost like your rug of life. You get a rug of life to get your career and job and relationships. It's like it's all tuning. It's like some unseen forces comes along, grabs the edge of rug of your life, and goes whoosh, and it upsets everything. And that's the way he said it is, that the oak tree has to lose those leaves in order for it to grow into its next thing. And what are those leaves to us? That's what I believe. That's what I think about myself, what I think I can do. See, if that oak tree, once it gets its leaves, it will only hang on to all that. And you just stay the same. So that the Creator has a way of taking the spirit out of your beliefs. It's like you end up in a new orbit. And when you make that transition into that 4th year, that 4th season, the reason that it seems to fall apart, you're just trying that old shit from the orbit you was in before, and it don't work. So you're up in a strange area. And so he said, this is what you do. You work that first 3 set of steps, most of us work the set of steps to get something. He said that 4th year, you've got to work that set of steps to give it up. He said you make an altar and you put everything on that altar. You put your steps. You put the big book. You put AA. You put your sponsor. You put your relationship. Everything goes on there. Because you get little pocket gods, and you don't know it. It happens so subtly. You get in trouble. Oh, I run to my sponsor. My sponsor saved my ass. No, he won't. That sponsor gets you drunk, right? Oh, the speaker will save my... That's not true. Or the big book, or the steps, it will. There's only one thing saves our ass, and that's God. Trusting God is what saves our ass. And he said that 4th year, that's how you work that set of steps. You work it to give up everything that you work for so that you can start over, come into that new time. And I found this is true in my sobriety, what the old man told me. I got in a little trouble at 7 to 8, got in trouble 11 to 12, got reckless, did dumb things. And I found that cycles, the circles of sobriety, that really works. A lot of people don't know about winter. They go drink. They don't know how come. They struggle through a whole winter and they'll pop right into 5. And they can't figure out what happened. So I got to really, for myself, I was taught about these cycles. Now those cycles, they just don't go 4 years. You know, say I have a circle here, it's 4 years. Then that second set actually goes to a south part of the cycle. Then to west part of the cycle, to the north part of the cycle. That's a 16-year cycle. People do dumb things 16 years. Right? There's something happens that doesn't happen those other winter seasons. You feel real loss. It's a dangerous time. You have to really be careful about that cycle because you're circling from these 16 to another set of 16. That trip is different than the other ones. It's different. And so that I found us that what we can do is, it wasn't being different. The cultures are not different. AA is not different. It's very powerful, AA is. The steps, to me, I would not call them sacred. They would come under that category as sacred because of what they can do. I'm going through a set right now. I'm going through this one different. Some time ago, I learned the power of step 2, how that sets the intent for step 10. Then when you look at that, this time I set my intent in step 2 to have freedom. I want to know about freedom. And if I had it to do over again, I don't think I would have started because what surfaces is all the place that's blocked. I hate that. You know, it just tears you up. But it's been a good journey. So I would just like to tell you how it is today, quickly. When I first came into the program, I had 3 children, and I couldn't see them. When I would go there, they would walk out the back door. They would leave. At 3 years sobriety, it was the first time I got them. I took them in a car, went Christmas shopping with them. We got done, we walked up to the steps, and there was a funny silence took place on those steps. My oldest son, he turned around and he looked at me. And he says, "Dad." And I said, "What?" He said, "I love you." And he's bigger than I am. He put his big arms around me. And I couldn't take it. My second son did the same thing. My daughter's summer, she come up. I turned around, I went to Colorado Springs. That's where I live in. I cried the whole way. And then I got married. I adopted a girl. And then we had 2 children, Morningstar and Kateri. Morningstar is 16 now, Kateri's 14. And that relationship also ended. It didn't end in disaster like the first one was pretty rugged. But it ended differently. But it didn't work out either. I quit a company that I worked for and I started a foundation called White Bison.
What White Bison does today is we work in the development of Native American communities, in community development. And this one particular tribe that we started working with, we work with them at a tribal level. They were 85% serious alcohol problems above the age of 12 in this tribe, 2,000. In 3 years, they went from 85% drinking. Today, the tribe is over 65% sober at a tribal level. This is how it works. Is we go to the community and we ask them if they want to get well and if they're willing to go to any length. Then we have these series of workshops where we have them look at what they're powerless over and where their unmanageability is at a community level. And when they get that done, we do a community step 2. And we have them create a vision of what would it be like if we were well. And then we hold a big ceremony and we bring the spiritual people together in the pipes and all that. And we turn the community will over to the care of the Creator. A community has a will just like the individual has a will. And before they through, we do inventory and resentment, fear, and sex. And we come out with a list of community defects of character. Jealousy, backstabbing. And then we go into a process of making amends. Does this sound familiar? And it works. Because it is a spiritual process given to us by the Creator. And we're in another community doing the same. This process that the Creator gave us, these steps of AA, is very sacred. I never ever thought that I would be doing what I was doing today. I would be where I am today, and it hasn't been perfect by any means. I have got things. I've lost everything a couple times in AA. Actually, next Friday, it might happen again. I'm in a court system with some things going on there. And the only thing that I knew to do after I got through with this, I will say this lawyer stuff, I hopped in the steps and I said, I'll bet that if I go through I can maintain sanity. And I have. The tools are there to do that. And I don't have that fear. It's almost like I know I'm headed to hell and I have a freedom going right into it. Not 100%, but it's right there. I should be panicking, but I'm not. And it's nice that I don't have to do that. And so I have good relationships with my children, except one daughter. We have to work on some stuff there. And we're doing that. I currently am in probably the most healthy relationship that I've ever been in. Healthy relationship means you work through conflicts positively. You don't do that. And that's been going on for coming up on a year. And it's really good. She's sitting right there. Her name is Gail. Gail, stand up. I will catch heck for having her do that because the instructions were to not, but I didn't. So I guess I would just say this. The journey has been good. Last year I was doing some review and I made a list. Part of what I was doing is I listed influential people in my life. And then I put them in a priority. The most influential person in my life was my grandpa, because he raised me. So I learned to say grandpa says. And there are two people in here as that come out on my list, more so than my brothers or people in my tribe or whatever, that were influential in my life. So Frank and Don B. They were really influential, like really influential in my life, giving me those. They were not easy. I am telling you, they weren't easy. By all my life. They taught me about how to find God, about how this program worked, and they took all the fancy stuff out of it. Basic, and repeat it and do it again, and don't get fancy. And I get fancy, I get called on it. And that's the way that I was taught, and I really love them both for that. And many of the others too. I guess if I would close with this, if I say the worst thing that happened, if I had to pick one, you know how you got your stuff when you're drinking. But if I had to pick one thing that was the worst thing of it all, it was that loneliness, that hole. And man, you couldn't get rid of it no matter what you did. It would not go away. It didn't matter. It didn't matter going to bed with somebody or in a dance hall. You couldn't make that hole go away. That was the worst thing. It drove me crazy, that hole. In the AA, I taught what that hole was filled with was my relationship with the Creator. If I pick the best thing that I have out of this program, I would say it's my relationship with Tankashla, the Great Spirit, or God, whatever. That's the best thing I have. I have a relationship. Practical, common sense. It's not scary. I don't have a fear of doing the will of God. I know I'm still under that cloud. That cloud doesn't go away after you get little knowledge. It doesn't go. It stays right with you. That cloud is still there. And I know it's there. Because I watch when I'm off track, I do things dumb or stupid. I watch that cloud come and help me see the lessons and help me, do the learnings. It's still there. So that has been the best thing. Is my relationship with the Creator, because it's so dependable. It's not like 50-50. No, that 12 step, it says like haven't had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. I mean, those are. It doesn't say maybe or kinda. Or possibly. I mean, it states it, says it, haven't had. That's the way it is. But that thing, as I was taught, you have to do the work. And this is good. So that's the way I was taught. So who knows how it goes in the future. I look forward to life. I have a lot of fun. I laugh a lot. I can cry. I can cry in front of people. And I do. And it's so healthy to cry. I recovered from my sexual abuse. That was a tough one to work through the steps. Being sexually abused by an uncle. It's tough work. But I remember the day that it popped out of the steps. Just that work in itself. It was like somebody took a sun and turned it on for the first time in my life. When I broke free of that sexual abuse. It's powerful. But that when I come out of that, there were some other things. I had feelings that I didn't know about feelings. Well, I feel good. Well, how you do? I feel fine. I'm not talking about Ash. I'm talking about feelings. And when I got out of that sexual abuse that time, I had feelings I didn't know what they were. I didn't know the name. I didn't know what it felt like. And I go to my sister, because I was close to her then. And I go to her, because these things, they just started to come out. And I would describe this thing to her. And she'd say what that means, what that feeling is. It means you care. And I didn't know what that meant to care. I knew what it meant to help. But I didn't know what that meant to care. And all those things, they came out. And then I found I had to work them in balance because feelings can get you in trouble, you know. You know me. They can, because it's like the big book. It says, when irritated or doubtful, you don't ask God to direct your feelings. He says you direct your thinking. And I had to learn that relationship between feelings and thinking, and how does all that interconnect with each other. I didn't know that. And so it's just really good. It's good to be alive. It's good to be here. It's good to be with you. So with that, I'll just close with this prayer. It's just a very short prayer, and it says, God, thank you for what you've given me. And God, thank you for what you've taken from me. And God, thank you for what you've left me. And what I have left with is this program, Alcoholics Anonymous, and you people. See, I will say this, is like when I eventually at my own tribe, I got kicked out. I couldn't go there. You can't kick me out for one thing, but you never did either. By your own rules. Right? And you didn't. And when you say, keep coming back, you meant it. You weren't kidding. You said, get out of here because I was the meeting's drunk, but you say, come back. And I didn't. So it's like you are my tribe. If I had to depend on one, if I had to pick one, I pick you. You know. I know that sometimes when I was sick and some things, I would say, I would rather have like the Al-Anons and the AAs pray. Because you know how to pray. You know how to do that. And I would say that many of us, you know, here, we get here because of our Al-Anons. We can never not respect those Al-Anons and what they do. We must always respect with them and look at them as sacred. We sometimes have jokes going back and forth. But we've got to really be careful to keep that joke in a good spirit. Because the Al-Anons is very powerful. And I honor you, Al-Anons, you know, that are here. So thank you all very much, and have a good dance and a good journey tonight. And I'll put my eagle feather away, and then I'll have to see what Frank's going to say. Well, you did this, you did that, and go back through the steps and all of that stuff. So thank you all very much.